I never imagined that teaching a creature from the wilderness to write would force me to confront everything I thought I knew about intelligence, consciousness, and what it truly means to be human. But when I found those first crude letters scratched into the dirt outside my cabin in the Oregon forests, I realized I'd stumbled into something that would challenge not just my understanding of the world, but humanity's place in it. My name is Robert Keegan, and in 1994, at 57 years old, I was exactly where I wanted to be, alone. After spending 3 decades as a high school English teacher in Portland, I'd retired early, taken my pension, and bought a small cabin on 40 acres of dense forest near the town of Estacada. My wife, Linda, had passed away from breast cancer 2 years earlier, and the house we'd shared in the suburbs had become unbearable, filled with memories that were both precious and painful. The cabin was primitive by most standards: no phone line, unreliable electricity from a generator, water from a well I had to pump by hand. But it had what I needed: solitude, books, and distance from a world that had started feeling too loud, too fast, too complicated. It was 1994, and while the rest of America was discovering the internet and watching O.J. Simpson's White Bronco on TV, I was reading Thoreau by lamplight and learning to split firewood without throwing out my back. The first sign that I wasn't as alone as I thought came on a cool October morning. I'd gone out to check my propane tank and found something strange near the tree line: scratches in the dirt that looked almost deliberate. At first, I thought it might be a bear marking territory, but the patterns were too regular, too intentional. They looked like someone had been trying to draw letters, but didn't quite know how. I'm a rational man, or at least I thought I was. I'd taught English literature for 30 years, spent my life in the company of books and ideas, and I'd never been one for supernatural nonsense or cryptid stories. But standing there looking at those marks, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. Over the next week, more marks appeared. Each time, they were closer to the cabin, and each time, they looked a little more like actual letters, crude approximations of H and E and L, as if someone, or something, was trying to spell words without understanding the alphabet. I should have been frightened. Instead, I was curious. Maybe it was the teacher in me, or maybe it was the loneliness that had been my constant companion since Linda died. But I found myself responding. I took a stick and wrote in the dirt, "Hello." The next morning, my word was gone, replaced by a shaky attempt at copying it. The letters were backwards and uneven, but the intent was clear: something was trying to communicate. I set up a simple system. Each morning, I'd write a new word in a cleared patch of dirt near the tree line, always choosing simple, concrete nouns: tree, water, rock, sky. Each night, whatever was out there would attempt to copy them. The progress was slow, but undeniable. By the end of the second week, the copies were becoming more accurate. On November 3rd, 1994, I finally saw what I'd been teaching. I'd stayed up late reading Walden, appropriately enough, and had dozed off in my chair. I woke around 3 in the morning to use the bathroom, and as I passed the window, I caught movement in the moonlight. Something large was crouched in the clearing where I'd been writing my lessons. My first instinct was bear, but the shape was all wrong. Too tall even when crouching, too deliberate in its movements. I watched, frozen, as it used a stick to carefully trace letters in the dirt, its massive hand moving with surprising delicacy. The creature stood, and I got my first clear look at it in the moonlight. It was enormous, at least 7 feet tall, maybe more, covered in dark fur that looked almost black in the pale light. Its shoulders were incredibly broad, its arms longer than human proportions would allow. But it was the posture that struck me most: upright, bipedal, unmistakably intelligent in the way it carried itself. I'd heard the stories, of course. Every person who'd spent time in the Pacific Northwest had heard about Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever you wanted to call it. I'd always filed those stories under the same category as UFOs and the Loch Ness Monster, entertaining folklore, nothing more. But here one was, standing in my clearing, practicing letters like a child learning to write. The rational part of my brain was screaming that this couldn't be real, that I was hallucinating or dreaming. But I'd been a teacher long enough to recognize a student when I saw one, regardless of species. The creature finished its practice and melted back into the forest with surprising silence for something so large. I stood at the window for another hour, my heart racing, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. At dawn, I went out to examine what it had written. The word I'd left the day before was hand, and the creature had copied it 3 times, each iteration slightly better than the last. But it had also added something new. A crude drawing of a hand, 5 fingers clearly depicted next to the word. It was making the connection between symbol and meaning. I sat down heavily on the stump I used for splitting wood, my mind reeling. This wasn't just mimicry. This was comprehension, learning, the foundation of language acquisition. In 30 years of teaching, I'd seen this exact progression in countless students, but never had I imagined seeing it in something that wasn't human. The teacher in me took over. If this creature wanted to learn, I would teach it. God help me, but I would teach it. I went back to basics. I created a primitive classroom in the clearing, a flat board mounted on 2 stumps that would serve as a writing surface. I used chalk, which would be easier to see than scratches in the dirt. And I established a schedule coming out at dusk when I'd seen evidence that the creature was most active. For the first few sessions, I never saw it directly. I'd write lessons on the board, leave simple objects next to corresponding words, a rock next to rock, a pine cone next to cone, and retreat to the cabin. In the morning, I'd find the lessons completed, the words copied, sometimes with crude drawings that showed the creature understood the associations. The breakthrough came on November 18th. I was at the board writing the word tree and preparing to head back inside when I heard a sound behind me, a low, rumbling vocalization that made every hair on my body stand up. I turned slowly, and there it was, no more than 20 feet away. In the fading light, I could see it clearly for the first time. The fur was a dark brown, not black as I'd thought, streaked with gray around what passed for a face. The features were somewhere between human and ape, but not quite either, a flatter face than a gorilla, a more prominent brow than a person. The eyes were what held me, though, dark and intelligent, watching me with an expression I could only describe as cautious curiosity. "Hello," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I'm Robert. I've been leaving these lessons for you." The creature made another sound, softer this time, and took a step closer. I forced myself to stand still, to project calm even though my heart was hammering. This was a predator, I reminded myself, something that could kill me without effort, if it chose to. But it was also a student, and I'd never turned away a student who wanted to learn. It approached the board slowly, keeping its eyes on me. When it reached the chalk, it picked it up with surprising delicacy. Those massive hands handled the small piece of chalk like I might handle a delicate piece of crystal. It looked at me, then at the board, then back at me as if asking permission. I nodded and stepped back, giving it space. The creature wrote. The letters were shaky and uneven, but unmistakable. Tree. "Yes," I said, my voice thick with emotion I didn't fully understand. "That's right. That's very good." It made a sound that might have been pleasure or satisfaction, then pointed at itself. It was asking what it was called, what its word was. I thought about all the names humans had given to creatures like this: Bigfoot, Sasquatch, terms that were more joke than designation. This creature deserved better than that. It deserved to name itself, but first, it needed more language. "Not yet," I told it. "First you learn, then you choose your name, understand?" It tilted its head, considering, then nodded, an unmistakably human gesture that sent another chill through me. Over the next weeks, our lessons became routine. The creature, I started thinking of it as my student, for lack of a better term, Learned with a speed that was both exciting and humbling. We moved from simple nouns to verbs, from individual words to simple sentences. Its handwriting improved dramatically, though it would never be elegant, given the size and structure of its hands. By December, we were having simple written conversations. I'd write a question, "Where do you live?" It would respond with crude but clear words. Trees, mountains, alone. That last word, alone, struck something in me. I knew loneliness. I've been living with it since Linda died. But my loneliness was a choice, a retreat from a world I could rejoin whenever I wanted. This creature's loneliness was existential, fundamental. It was alone in a way I could barely comprehend. "Are there others?" I wrote one cold evening, my breath misting in the air. "Like you?" The creature, I could see it was male now, certain anatomical features becoming clear during our sessions, took a long time to answer. Finally, he wrote, "Don't know, maybe, long ago." The implications of that response kept me awake that night. If there had been others but weren't anymore, or if this creature had been separated from his kind so long ago he couldn't remember them clearly, then I was possibly teaching the last of his species to read and write. The responsibility of that felt crushing. Christmas approached, and I found myself doing something I hadn't done since Linda died: decorating. Nothing elaborate, just a small tree in the cabin and some lights powered by my generator. When my student arrived for his evening lesson, he stopped at the edge of the clearing, staring at the colored lights visible through the window. I wrote on the board, "Holiday, celebration, light in darkness." He approached the window, fascinated, his large form silhouetted against the colored glow. Then he turned to me and wrote something that brought tears to my eyes. "Beautiful. Thank you." We were connecting, this impossible creature and this lonely old man. We were building something that transcended species, that touched on what it meant to be conscious, to think, to feel, to reach across the void of isolation and make contact with another thinking being. But with that connection came questions I wasn't prepared to answer. What was my responsibility here? Should I tell someone about this? Could I even prove it if I tried? And most troubling of all, by teaching this creature to write, by giving him language and the ability to express complex thoughts, was I helping him or condemning him to an even deeper awareness of his isolation? These questions haunted me as 1994 drew to a close. I'd started this as a curious intellectual exercise, a way to fill my lonely days. But it had become something far more profound and far more troubling. I didn't know it then, but those questions were about to become far more complicated, because my student was about to start writing things that would challenge everything I thought I understood about humanity, civilization, and our place in the world. And once he started, there would be no going back for either of us. January 1995 arrived with heavy snowfall that blanketed the Oregon forest in white silence. The cold didn't deter my student. If anything, he seemed more comfortable in the winter months than I was. While I bundled up in layers of flannel and wool, he would arrive at our evening lessons seemingly unbothered by temperatures that made my joints ache and my breath hang in the air like frozen clouds. Our lessons had evolved considerably since those first crude letters in the dirt. I'd brought out an old portable chalkboard I'd kept from my teaching days, along with boxes of chalk in different colors. My student had developed a preference for white and blue chalk, and his handwriting, while still large and somewhat awkward due to the size of his hands, had become remarkably legible. We'd moved beyond simple vocabulary into more complex territory. I taught him verb tenses, the concept of past and future, the subtle differences between want and need, between know and understand. He absorbed everything with a hunger that reminded me of my best students back in Portland, the ones who saw learning not as a chore, but as a doorway to understanding the world. But it was on January 15th that everything changed. I'd been teaching him about questions, how to form them, how they were the foundation of all knowledge and discovery. I wrote on the board, "Questions help us learn. What questions do you have?" I expected simple queries about vocabulary or grammar, maybe clarification about some concept we'd covered. Instead, after a long pause during which he stared at the board with that intense focus I'd come to recognize, he wrote, "Why do humans cut down trees?" I stood there, chalk in hand, suddenly aware that I'd moved from teaching language to something far more complex. This wasn't just vocabulary anymore. This was philosophy, ethics, the beginning of critical thinking about human behavior and its consequences. For wood, I wrote carefully, to build houses, to make paper, to clear land for farms and cities. He read my answer, then wrote with deliberate strokes, "But trees are home, for birds, for deer, for me. Why is human home more important?" I had no easy answer. How do you explain human exceptionalism, the idea that human needs supersede all others, to someone who lives in the forest and sees the interconnection of all life? I settled for honesty. Humans think they are most important. Not all humans think this way, but many do. "Is that true?" he wrote. "Are humans most important?" "I don't know," I wrote back, and it was the truth. "Now, what do you think?" He considered this for a long time, so long that I thought perhaps I'd pushed too far, introduced concepts he wasn't ready for. But then he began to write, slowly and deliberately. "All things are important. Tree important to bird, bird important to forest, human important to human, me important to me, no one most important." I read his words 3 times, feeling something shift in my chest. In a few simple sentences, this creature had articulated a philosophy of interconnectedness and inherent worth that humans had struggled with for millennia. He'd done it without knowing terms like ecology or intrinsic value, arriving at the concept through pure observation and logical reasoning. "That's very wise," I wrote. "What is wise?" he asked. "Understanding truth, seeing clearly, thinking deeply." He seemed pleased by this definition, his posture relaxing slightly. Then he wrote something that made my breath catch. "You are wise. You teach me. Who teaches humans?" It was a devastating question, really. Who did teach humans? Parents, schools, churches, society, all of these shaped human thought. But did they teach wisdom or simply perpetuate existing patterns? I'd spent 30 years as a teacher, supposedly molding young minds, but how much wisdom had I actually imparted versus how much information had I simply transferred? "Many people teach humans," I wrote. "But humans don't always learn. Sometimes humans think they already know everything. That is not wise," he wrote. And I had to smile despite the cold. "No," I agreed, "it's not." This conversation marked a turning point in our relationship. We were no longer just teacher and student. We were 2 thinking beings engaged in genuine philosophical discourse, exploring questions that had no easy answers. Over the following weeks, my students' questions became increasingly sophisticated and, frankly, uncomfortable. He asked why humans fought wars when war only brought death and suffering. He asked why humans kept some animals as pets but ate others, what made one animal worthy of love and another worthy of slaughter. He asked why humans lived in boxes, houses, instead of under the sky where they could see the stars and feel the wind. Each question forced me to confront assumptions I'd simply accepted as normal without ever examining their logic or ethics. One particularly memorable exchange occurred in late January during a lesson on the concept of ownership. I'd been trying to explain property rights, the idea that land and objects could belong to people, a concept so fundamental to human society that I'd never questioned it. "How can land belong?" he wrote, his confusion evident in the heavy chalk strokes. "Land is land. Land was here before humans. Land will be here after humans." "Humans make laws," I explained. "Laws say this land is mine. That land is yours. You need money to buy land. Then it belongs to you." "What if land does not want to belong?" he wrote. I stared at that question for a long time. It was absurd on one level. Land doesn't have wants or desires in any conscious sense. But on another level, it was profound. What right did any of us have to claim ownership of the earth, to section it off and exclude others, to say, "This is mine," about something that existed long before we did and would exist long after we were gone? Humans don't ask the land, I finally wrote. Humans just take. That is sad, he responded simply. By February, I'd started keeping a journal of our conversations. Partly this was out of habit. I'd kept teaching journals for years, recording notable student insights and breakthrough moments. But this felt different. These exchanges felt historically important, as if I was documenting first contact between two sentient species. I wrote everything down, his questions, my answers, my observations about his learning process and cognitive development. My student had also begun reading books I brought from town. I started with children's books, simple sentences, clear pictures. He devoured them, his reading comprehension advancing rapidly. Within 2 weeks, he'd progressed to young adult novels, and by the end of February, he was ready for adult literature. I gave him Of Mice and Men by Steinbeck, thinking the themes of loneliness and friendship might resonate with his own situation. He read it in 3 sessions, holding the book with remarkable care given the size of his hands, turning pages with a delicacy that never ceased to amaze me. When he finished, he wrote a question that showed he'd understood not just the plot, but the deeper themes. Why did George kill Lenny if they were friends? We spent an hour discussing mercy, impossible choices, the difference between kindness and cruelty. I tried to explain how George's act was born of love, not hate, how he was protecting Lenny from a worse fate. My student struggled with this concept, finally writing, "Death is always worse. Life is better even if hard." "Do you really believe that?" I wrote. "What if life is only pain, only suffering?" "Then life is pain and suffering," he responded without hesitation. "But it is still life, still chance for change. Death is end, no chance." His unwavering commitment to the value of life, even difficult life, made me reconsider assumptions I'd held for decades. Here was a being who lived in isolation, who had no apparent community or family, who spent his days hiding from the only other intelligent species on the planet, and yet he viewed life as inherently precious, worth preserving even in suffering. March brought warmer weather and longer days. Our lessons expanded beyond the chalkboard. I brought out more books, everything from Jack London's Wilderness Tales to Mary Oliver's poetry to a tattered copy of National Geographic. He absorbed it all, and with each book, his understanding of humanity deepened. In April, something happened that showed me just how deeply he was processing what he learned. I'd given him a book about the logging industry in the Pacific Northwest, thinking it would interest him since he lived in these forests. I hadn't anticipated how profoundly it would affect him. He arrived at our evening lesson visibly agitated, his usual calm replaced by obvious distress. His movements were sharp, almost angry. "Humans kill forests," he wrote, the chalk nearly breaking under the force of his writing. "Cut trees that are hundreds of years old, kill animals, destroy homes. For what? For money. What is money worth more than life?" I tried to explain economics, the need for jobs, the complexity of human society's relationship with natural resources. My explanation sounded hollow, even to me, justifications rather than reasons. "I thought humans were wise," he wrote, and I could see something like disappointment in his posture. "I thought humans understood. But humans are destroying. Humans take and take and take. Why? Because we can," I wrote honestly, unable to dress up the truth in prettier language. Because we have power and we use it. Not all humans think this is right, but the humans who have the most power often care the least about the consequences. "Then humans are dangerous," he wrote. "More dangerous than bear or cougar. Bear kills to eat. Human kills for money. What is more dangerous?" I had no answer that wouldn't confirm his conclusion. He was right. Humans were dangerous, had always been dangerous, particularly to species and beings that were different, vulnerable, or simply in the way of what we wanted. We sat in silence for a while, the only sound the wind moving through the pine trees. Finally, my student wrote something that made me understand the depth of his isolation. Maybe it is good there are no more like me. Maybe if there were more, humans would hunt them, kill them. Maybe better to be alone than to watch your kind die. Don't say that, I wrote, my hand shaking. Loneliness isn't better than death. Connection matters. You would know, he wrote, and I realized he was referencing things I'd told him about Linda, about my own isolation. You are alone too. Is it better? I stood there in the gathering darkness, facing a question I'd been avoiding for 2 years. Was my isolation better than the pain of loss? No, I finally wrote, it's not better. I miss her every day. But I wouldn't trade the years we had together just to avoid the pain of losing her. The connection was worth the cost. Then maybe it would be good to find others like me, he wrote slowly. Even if dangerous, connection is worth cost. As spring progressed, I realized that what had started as simple language lessons had become something far more significant. I wasn't just teaching my student to read and write. I was watching the development of a complete philosophical framework, a worldview emerging from the intersection of his lived experience and the human knowledge I was sharing with him. And his observations about humanity, his questions about our values and behaviors, were forcing me to see my own species with fresh eyes. Not always flattering eyes, but perhaps more honest ones than I'd ever turned on humanity before. May 1995 brought wildflowers to the forest floor and a new intensity to our lessons. My student had become more than just literate. He'd become a philosopher, and his observations about humanity were becoming increasingly sharp, uncomfortable, and impossible to dismiss. I'd expanded our library considerably, making trips to Portland twice a month to visit used bookstores. The cashiers must have thought I was preparing for some kind of intellectual apocalypse, the way I loaded up boxes with such diverse material. I couldn't explain that I was educating a creature that science said didn't exist. My student had developed clear preferences. He loved poetry, particularly Walt Whitman and Emily Dickinson, though he struggled with metaphor. He was fascinated by anthropology and history, but deeply disturbed by accounts of human conflict. When I gave him a book about World War II, he spent an entire week processing the information before he could write his response. 6 million Jews killed, he finally wrote, the chalk marks heavy and deliberate. Millions more. Humans killed other humans, not for food, not for territory, for hate, for ideology. What is ideology worth 6 million lives? I'd taught the Holocaust for years, had discussed it with hundreds of students, but I'd never felt the weight of it quite like this, explaining humanity's capacity for systematic evil to a being who seemed incapable of that kind of hatred. Nothing is worth that, I wrote. Those who did it were wrong, evil. But they were human, he pressed, normal humans. The book says normal people did this, followed orders. How? He'd been reading Hannah Arendt's work on the banality of evil, and he'd grasped the concept with terrifying clarity. Humans can be taught to stop thinking, I wrote carefully, to follow without questioning, to see other humans as less than human. Like humans see me? He asked. The question hit like a physical blow. Yes, I admitted, after a long pause. Like that. He was quiet for a long time, then wrote, "If humans can do this to other humans, what would humans do to me if they knew I existed?" I wanted to reassure him, to say that modern humans were different, that we'd learned from our mistakes. But I thought about how we treated animals we considered intelligent. Apes in research labs, dolphins in captivity, elephants in zoos. I thought about how we'd driven countless species to extinction without remorse. And I knew I couldn't lie to him. Some humans would want to protect you, I wrote honestly. Some would want to study you. Some would want to profit from you. Some would want to kill you out of fear. I don't know which group would win. Neither do I, he wrote. That is why I stay hidden. As May progressed, my student began writing not just questions, but extended observations, passages that were becoming something like essays. He'd sit for hours thinking, then fill the board with his thoughts. I started bringing notebooks, transcribing everything he wrote, preserving his words. One evening, he wrote an observation that I later titled, "On Human Progress." Humans are proud of progress. Humans say they are advanced. Humans point to cities and machines and technology. But what is progress? Is cutting down ancient forests to build parking lot progress? Is damming rivers so salmon cannot spawn progress? Is filling air with smoke from factories progress? Humans measure progress by what they build. But humans do not measure what they destroy. Maybe progress should be measured by what you do not destroy, by what you leave alone, by how many generations of salmon still run in river, by how many old trees still stand. By that measure, humans are not advanced. Humans are going backward. I read these words multiple times, feeling their weight. This wasn't just criticism. It was a complete reframing of how we measure human achievement. And coming from a being who lived in harmony with the forest, who took only what he needed and left no permanent mark on the landscape, it carried an authority that human environmentalists couldn't quite match. "You should publish this," I said aloud. "Speaking for once instead of writing. People need to read this." He shook his head and wrote, "Humans would not listen to me. They would only want to capture me, study me. Maybe you write it. Say it is your words." "That would be dishonest," I protested. "Which is more important," he wrote. "Honesty about who wrote words or getting words to humans who need them?" It was a fair point, and it troubled me. I was sitting on insights that could potentially reshape how humans thought about progress and civilization, but sharing them would require either revealing my student's existence or plagiarizing his thoughts. Neither option felt right. June brought an unexpected complication. Tom Brewster, my nearest neighbor, who lived about 3 miles down the logging road, stopped by with concern written on his weathered face. "Bob, I'm going to be straight with you," he said, declining my offer of coffee and staying on the porch. "People in town are talking, saying you've gone strange up here. Mrs. Henderson at the post office says you're buying books about unusual subjects. The librarian says you've been checking out everything from anthropology to animal behavior. And Jake at the hardware store says you bought a bunch of chalkboards and teaching supplies last month." My stomach sank. I'd been so focused on my student that I hadn't considered how my behavior might look to others. "I'm writing a book," I said, improvising, "about my years teaching, about education philosophy. That's why all the materials." Tom studied me for a long moment. "That so? Because there's also been talk about strange sounds coming from your property at night. And Jerry Patterson says he was hiking up on the ridge last month and heard what sounded like 2 voices up here, one of them human, one of them not so much." "Jerry Patterson is drunk more often than he's sober," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "True enough," Tom admitted. "But Bob, you're my neighbor, and Linda was a good woman who I respected. So I'm going to say this once. If you're messing around with something dangerous up here, you need to be careful. These woods have a way of keeping secrets, but they don't keep them forever." After he left, I felt the walls closing in. We'd been so careful, my student and I, but careful might not be enough. That night, I told my student about the conversation. "Maybe we should stop," he wrote. "Lessons, too dangerous. For you, for me." "No," I wrote immediately. "We're not stopping. You have a right to learn. I won't take that away from you, because people are gossiping." "Even if dangerous," he pressed. "Even then," I confirmed. Despite the risks, we continued, and my student's observations continued to sharpen, his critique of human civilization becoming more sophisticated and more damning. In mid-June, he wrote what I later titled, "On Human Loneliness." "Humans build cities where millions live. Humans are never alone, always surrounded by other humans. Yet humans are lonely. Humans take pills for depression. Humans go to doctors to talk about feelings. Why? I am alone, truly alone, maybe last of my kind. Yet I am not lonely like humans are lonely. I am connected. Connected to forest, to deer who drink from stream, to owl who hunts at night, to trees that give shelter. Humans live with millions but are disconnected from Earth, from animals, from each other. Humans have forgotten how to be part of world. Humans think they are separate from world, above world. That is why humans are lonely. I read this passage multiple times, feeling it cut through layers of assumption I hadn't known I had. He was describing alienation, the fundamental disconnection that plagued modern human existence. And he was right. I'd been lonely since Linda died, but my loneliness had started before that, in the suburbs of Portland, surrounded by neighbors I barely knew, commuting to a school where I taught hundreds of students, but connected with few. July brought heat that made our evening lessons uncomfortable. My student seemed to suffer more than usual in the warmth. His kind was clearly adapted for cooler climates, but he never missed a session, arriving faithfully each evening despite the temperature. He'd become interested in human relationships, particularly after reading several novels about love and marriage. His questions revealed assumptions about human behavior that were both insightful and troubling. Humans promise to love forever, he wrote one evening, but then humans divorce, leave each other, hurt each other. Why make promise if you will not keep it? People change, I explained, or they discover they weren't compatible. Love is complicated. You loved your wife until she died, he observed. You kept promise. I was lucky, I wrote. We were compatible. We grew together instead of apart. Not everyone has that. Humans choose partners based on feelings, he wrote. Feelings that change. Humans should choose partners based on character. Character does not change. Someone with good character will be good partner even when feelings change. It was such a simple observation, yet it contained more wisdom about relationships than most marriage counseling. I thought about all the divorces among my teaching colleagues, relationships that had crumbled under stress or faded when the initial passion cooled. In late July, I brought him a book about American history, thinking the Revolutionary period might interest him. He read it in 2 days, then arrived at our lesson with questions I wasn't prepared to answer. United States was founded on principle, he wrote. All men are created equal. These words are in Declaration of Independence. But men who wrote these words owned slaves, kept humans as property. How? I'd taught this contradiction for years, but explaining it to my student required a level of honesty I wasn't used to bringing to the discussion. They didn't see slaves as men, I wrote. Not fully. They made exceptions to their principles. Then principles are not principles, he wrote, and I felt the weight of his logic. Principles are only principles if you follow them always, especially when difficult. If you only follow principles when convenient, they are not principles, they are preferences. The distinction was devastating in its clarity. How much of what we called principles were really just preferences we followed when they didn't cost us anything. Humans write beautiful words about equality and justice and freedom, he continued. But then, humans do not follow these words. Humans had slavery. Humans had genocide of native people, all while saying all men are created equal. Either humans do not understand their own words, or humans are hypocrites. Which is it? Both, I wrote, feeling the weight of human history pressing down on me. Sometimes humans truly don't understand. Sometimes they understand, but choose convenience over principle. Is truth too clear, he asked, or is lie more comfortable? I had no answer to that. By September, I'd filled 3 notebooks with transcriptions of my students' writing. I read through them sometimes, marveling at the journey from those first crude letters to these sophisticated philosophical essays, and I struggled with what to do with them. What do you want me to do with your words? I asked him one evening. He thought for a long time, then wrote, "They are not my words, they are truth. Truth does not belong to anyone. Truth just is." If humans need these truths, share them. Say they are from observer, from outsider. I do not need credit. I need humans to listen. That evening, I asked him something that had been weighing on me. Is this making you hate us? Hate humanity? He took a very long time to answer. Finally, he wrote, "No, I do not hate humans. I am disappointed in humans. Humans have such potential, such capacity for beauty and creation and love. I see this in your books, in your poetry. But humans choose not to be magnificent. Humans choose small, choose selfish. That is not hatred I feel. That is sadness. Sadness for what humans could be, but are not." Then he added, "It is not too late. Humans can change. I have changed through learning. Humans can too. That is why education matters. That is why you were teacher." His faith in human potential, despite everything he'd learned about our failures, was humbling. Here was this creature, this monster that humans feared and hunted, expressing more hope for humanity than I'd had in years. October 1995 arrived with the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and doesn't leave. I was 78 years old now, and I could feel time pressing against me in ways I couldn't ignore. My hands shook more than they used to. My heart medication needed adjusting, and I'd started having episodes of shortness of breath that worried me more than I let on. My student noticed everything, of course. He always did. "You are not well," he wrote one evening when I arrived at our lesson late, having needed to rest twice on the short walk from the cabin. "I'm old," I wrote back. "This is what happens." "You should see doctor," he insisted. "Doctors ask questions. Questions I can't answer without lying. I'm fine." "You are not fine," he pressed, his writing more emphatic than usual. "You are important to me. If you die, I will be alone again. More alone than before because now I know what it is to have connection." His honesty pierced me. "I'm not planning to die anytime soon," I wrote, though I wasn't sure that was a promise I could keep. "And you wouldn't be alone. You'd have everything I've taught you, all those books, all those ideas." "Ideas are not same as person," he wrote with surprising force. "You taught me that. Ideas can comfort, but they cannot talk back. They cannot understand. They cannot care. You care. That is different." I sat down heavily on the stump I'd started using as a chair, feeling the weight of his words. I'd become so focused on teaching him, on documenting his observations, that I'd forgotten he'd become emotionally attached to me. Of course he had. I was the only being he could truly communicate with, the only one who saw him as a person rather than a monster or a myth. "I care about you too," I wrote, "more than I expected to. You've become family." He made a sound I'd learned to recognize as emotion, a low, rumbling vocalization that seemed to come from deep in his chest. Then he wrote, "Then family should take care of each other. You take care of me by teaching. Let me take care of you." What I needed was time, which he couldn't give me. But I appreciated the offer more than I could express in chalk marks on a board. As October progressed, I made a decision. I would try to publish some of my students' observations. Not all of them, some were too specific, might raise questions I couldn't answer. But the broader philosophical pieces, the critiques of human nature that could have come from any deep thinker, those I could share. I spent several weeks editing, always careful to preserve his voice while removing anything that might identify him. I framed the essays as coming from an outside observer, which was technically true, and submitted them to various philosophy journals and magazines under my own name. The rejections came quickly. Too unconventional, too critical of human civilization, not scholarly enough. The reasons varied, but the result was the same. No one wanted to publish observations that made humanity look so flawed, so hypocritical, so lost. One rejection particularly stung. The editor wrote, "While these essays show interesting perspective, they read like they were written by someone who has never lived in human society. They're too idealistic, too simplistic, too divorced from reality." I showed this rejection to my student, curious about his reaction. He read it carefully, then wrote, "Editor is right. I have never lived in human society. I do not understand compromises. But maybe that is why my observations have value. I see what you cannot see because you are inside system. Sometimes outsider sees more clearly." "I agree," I wrote, "but that doesn't help us get published." "Maybe not ready yet," he observed. "Maybe humans need more time." In early November, we had a visitor that changed everything. I heard a truck coming up the logging road and had just enough time to signal my student to hide deep in the forest before a woman stepped out. She was in her early 40s, with the practical efficiency of someone who spent most of her time outdoors. "Mr. Keegan," she called. "I'm Dr. Helen Cartwright from Oregon State University. I'm conducting a survey of large mammal populations in this region. Do you have a few minutes?" I invited her onto the porch, my hands shaking as I offered coffee. She declined. "I'll be direct," she said, pulling out a folder. "We've been tracking some unusual findings in this area. Game cameras have picked up images that don't match known species, hair samples that show anomalous DNA, and several reports from hikers of something large and bipedal." "Bears," I suggested. "They can look bipedal from certain angles." "That's what we thought initially," she agreed, "but the stride length is wrong. The footprints show 5 toes in proportions that don't match bears or humans, and the DNA is fascinating. It shows genetic markers consistent with primates, but with significant variations we can't explain." "Sounds like contaminated samples," I said, keeping my voice steady. "That's possible," she conceded. "But Mr. Keegan, you've lived here for several years. Have you ever seen anything unusual?" "I've seen bears, cougars, elk, deer," I said honestly. "Nothing I couldn't explain." She studied me for a long moment. "We'd like permission to place camera traps on your property boundaries, just to monitor wildlife activity." "No," I said flatly. "I came out here for privacy. I don't want cameras on my property." Dr. Cartwright looked frustrated, but nodded. "I understand, but if you do see anything unusual, please contact us." After she left, I sat on the porch for a long time, my heart racing. The net was tightening. Game cameras, DNA analysis, systematic surveys. This wasn't amateur Bigfoot hunters anymore. This was serious science, and it was getting closer. That evening, my student arrived, looking agitated. "I saw her," he wrote. "I heard conversation. She is smart, dangerous." "She's doing her job," I said. "She doesn't know what she's looking for." "Not really." "She knows enough," he countered. "DNA samples. Where would they get my DNA?" I thought about that. "Do you scratch yourself on trees, leave hair behind?" He nodded reluctantly. "Then you'll need to be more careful. Stay away from areas where humans might find traces." "That is most of forest now," he wrote, frustration evident. "Humans are everywhere. How long can I hide?" It was a question I'd been asking myself more frequently. "As long as it takes," I wrote, with more confidence than I felt. November brought early snow and deeper problems. My student had been writing what we'd started calling the novel, a fictional story about an alien observer who comes to Earth and writes reports about humanity. It allowed us to present his observations through a framework that might be more publishable. But more importantly, November brought another health scare. I was in my workshop when chest pains hit, sharp and urgent. I barely made it to the cabin before collapsing into my chair, fumbling for my medication with shaking hands. My student must have sensed something was wrong because he appeared at my door within minutes, something he'd never done in daylight, a violation of all our safety protocols. He looked at me through the window, his face pressed against the glass, and the concern in his eyes was unmistakable. I gestured for him to go away, but he didn't move. He stayed there, watching, until the medication took effect and my breathing steadied. Only then did he retreat to the forest. That night, when I was strong enough to walk to our meeting place, he was waiting with an expression I'd never seen before, something between anger and fear. "You could have died," he wrote, the chalk breaking under the force. You were alone. What if you died alone? Everyone dies alone, I wrote back. Not true, he insisted. Linda died with you holding her hand. You told me. She was not alone. You should not be alone either. You can't come to the cabin during the day, I wrote. It's too dangerous. If someone sees you, if you die, nothing else matters, he interrupted. You are more important than safety. The emotion in his words shook me. To him, I wasn't just a teacher or friend. I was his only connection to another thinking being, his only proof that he wasn't entirely alone in the universe. We need to talk about what happens if I'm not okay, I said. If something happens to me. He didn't want to have that conversation, but I pressed on because it was necessary. My will leaves everything to a wildlife conservation trust, I explained. The cabin, the land, all of it will be preserved. You'll be safe here even after I'm gone. There's also money set aside. The cabin will be maintained, supplied with books. You won't be entirely alone. That is not same as you, he wrote, but his resistance was fading. No, I agreed. It's not, but it's what I can give you. December arrived with heavy snow. On December 20th, Tom Brewster made another visit, this time with news that made my blood run cold. Bob thought you should know, he said, stamping snow off his boots. That university professor, Dr. Cartwright, she's got funding for a major research project. Starting in spring, they're going to have teams doing systematic surveys, camera grids, even drones with thermal imaging. Why are you telling me this? I asked, though I knew. Tom looked at me directly. Because whatever you're protecting up here, it's not going to stay protected much longer. Thermal drones will see heat signatures through tree cover. If there's something out there that shouldn't exist, they're going to find it. He paused, then added, Linda made me promise to look out for you, so I'm telling you now, whatever this is, you need to figure out how it ends before someone else figures it out for you. After he left, I stood in the snow, feeling the cold seep through my jacket. Tom was right. Time was running out. That night I told my student everything about the research project, about the thermal drones, about how impossible it would be to hide once that technology was deployed. How long? He asked. Spring, I said. March or April, maybe 4 or 5 months. Then we have time to decide, he wrote. Decide what happens, decide how story ends. Or how it begins, I suggested. Maybe this isn't an ending. Maybe it's time to stop hiding and start controlling the narrative. He looked at me, understanding dawning. You mean reveal on purpose before they find me? On your terms, I said, with conditions, protections. It's risky, but it might be less risky than being discovered by researchers who see you as a specimen. That is big risk, he wrote. Yes, I agreed, but doing nothing is also a risk. He didn't answer immediately. He looked out at the snow-covered forest, the place that had been his home and hiding place. Finally, he wrote, I am afraid, more afraid than I have ever been. But I am also tired of hiding, tired of being alone. If there is chance that revealing myself leads to being recognized as person, then I want to try. Are you sure? I wrote. No, he wrote honestly, but I am decided. We do this on our terms. Over the next weeks, we planned meticulously. The question wasn't just whether to reveal him, but how. How to control the narrative, how to establish protections, how to ensure he was seen as a person rather than a specimen. As the year ended and 1996 began, we both knew our small world was about to change forever. The only question was whether we could shape that change or whether it would overwhelm us both. January 1996 arrived with bitter cold that made even breathing painful. I was 78 years old and my body was staging what felt like a full-scale rebellion. The chest pains had become more frequent, my hands shook constantly, and there were mornings when getting out of bed required negotiations with joints that wanted nothing to do with movement. But my mind was clear, clearer perhaps than it had been in years. The deadline, doctor, Cartwright's research project had focused everything. We had maybe 3 months until April, when the snow melted and the drones would fly, to decide what happened next. My student and I spent those winter months in intense discussion, working through every possible scenario. He'd write questions, I'd write responses, and together we'd try to map out futures that might actually be survivable. "What happens if I reveal myself?" he wrote one evening. Exactly, step by step. I'd thought about this extensively. First, we need to control the circumstances. Not a surprise discovery, but a planned revelation. We contact someone trustworthy, maybe a journalist, maybe a scientist who understands ethics, maybe a legal expert who can help establish your rights before anyone sees you. "Do such people exist?" he asked skeptically. "I hope so," I wrote honestly. "I've been researching. There are bioethicists who've written about animal rights and consciousness. There are journalists who've done investigative work on scientific ethics. We'd need to find the right combination." "And then?" he pressed. "Then we present you not as a discovery, but as a person requesting recognition and protection. We'd have documentation, all our lessons, your writing, your observations, proof of your intelligence that would be hard to dismiss. We demand conditions: no captivity, no invasive research without consent, recognition of your autonomy." "Would that work?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "There's no precedent, but it's better than being discovered by researchers who might not ask permission." He thought about this for a long time, then wrote, "What if humans refuse? What if they decide creature has no rights?" It was the question that haunted me. "Then we fight," I wrote. "Legally, publicly. We make it a media story, force humanity to confront whether intelligence determines personhood or whether being human is the only thing that matters." "That is big fight," he observed. "You are old. You are sick. Can you fight that fight?" "I can try," I wrote, "for as long as I'm able." "And when you cannot," he asked, "who fights for me then?" I had no answer. It was the central problem. After I was gone, who would protect him? Who would advocate for him? On January 28th, something happened that changed everything. I'd gone into Estacada for supplies, and when I returned, I found Tom Brewster's truck in my clearing. But it wasn't Tom waiting on my porch. It was Dr. Helen Cartwright, and she had an expression that made my heart sink. "Mr. Keegan," she said as I approached, "I need to talk to you about something serious. May I come inside?" I had no good reason to refuse. Inside, she pulled out a folder and laid several photographs on my table. They showed large humanoid footprints in the snow around my property, recent ones from the last few weeks. "These were taken by a hiker who got lost and ended up near your property line," she said, watching my face. "Mr. Keegan, these prints are consistent with every other anomalous print we've found, and they're all over your property." "Nah," I said nothing, waiting to see how much she actually knew. "I'm not here to accuse you," she continued, "but I need to know what you know. Whatever's making these prints is real. It's here, and it's spending time on your land." I looked at her for a long moment, weighing options. Then I made a decision that had been forming for weeks. "What if I told you that what you're looking for isn't a what, but a who?" I said quietly. "What if I told you that the creature you're hunting is intelligent, conscious, and capable of communication? What would you do then?" Dr. Cartwright's eyes widened. "Are you saying you've had contact with it?" "I'm asking a hypothetical question," I said. "If you discovered an intelligent being, something that could think and feel and communicate, would you treat it as an animal to be studied or a person to be respected?" She sat back, processing this. "That would depend on the level of intelligence. Basic tool use, or something more?" "Something more," I said. "Much more. Language comprehension, abstract thinking, philosophical reasoning, self-awareness, everything that defines consciousness and personhood, but in a non-human form." Dr. Cartwright was quiet for a long time. "If what you're describing exists, it would raise profound ethical questions. Questions about rights, about personhood, about how we treat intelligent beings that aren't human. And how would you answer those questions? I pressed. Honestly, I don't know, she admitted. I'd like to think I'd prioritize the being's welfare. But I know there would be enormous pressure to study such a being. It would be complicated. Complicated is not reassuring, I said. She looked at me directly. Are you protecting something on your property? Something intelligent? I didn't answer directly. If such a being existed, and if it wanted to reveal itself on its own terms, with protections and guarantees of autonomy, could you help with that? Could you be part of a process that respects the being's rights rather than treating it as a research subject? You're asking if I'd put ethics before science, she said. Yes, I confirmed. That's exactly what I'm asking. She was silent, thinking. I'd need guarantees. I'd need to know this isn't a hoax. And I'd need assurances that other parties would be involved, bioethicists, legal experts. This can't just be you and me. Agreed, I said. But you'd be willing to try? Yes, she said finally. I would. Give me some time, I said. I need to consult with someone. If we decide to proceed, I'll contact you before the end of February. After she left, I sat at my table shaking. I'd essentially confirmed my student's existence, opened a door that couldn't be closed. That night, I told my student everything. He listened in silence, then sat thinking for nearly an hour before responding. She knows, he finally wrote, or almost knows. Door is open now. Yes, I agreed. I'm sorry, I made a decision without consulting you first, but we're out of time. Do you trust her? He asked. I believe she's sincere about ethics, I said. And she's right, that we need more people involved. What are chances this goes well? He asked. I thought carefully. Maybe 50-50. There are too many variables. But doing nothing is 0%. That definitely ends with you being discovered on someone else's terms. He absorbed this, then wrote, What do you think I should do? I can't answer that, I said. This is your life, your choice. But the decision has to be yours. He sat there in the cold January night, this massive being who'd learned to read and write, who'd developed sophisticated philosophy. Finally, he wrote, All my life I have been hiding, watching humans from distance. It has been safe, but it has not been living. You taught me that connection matters, that isolation is not same as safety. I am afraid, but I am tired of hiding. If there is chance that revealing myself leads to recognition as person, I want to try. Are you sure? I wrote. No, he wrote honestly, but I am decided. We do this on our terms. Over the next 3 weeks, we planned meticulously. I contacted Dr. Cartwright and told her we were ready, but only with conditions. She agreed to bring in 3 other people, a bioethicist from Stanford, a civil rights attorney, and a journalist known for ethical reporting. All 4 signed non-disclosure agreements and agreed to meet at my cabin in late February. They'd see my student, review our documentation, and help develop a framework for revelation that prioritized his autonomy. The night before the meeting, my student and I sat together in the cabin for the first time. He'd always stayed outside before. Are you frightened? I asked. Yes, he wrote, but also hopeful. What if they don't see you as a person? He asked. Then we make them see, I said. We show them your writing, your observations, your capacity for thought. We make it impossible to deny your personhood. He was quiet, then wrote, Whatever happens, thank you. For teaching me, for seeing me, for being family. Even if this ends badly, it was worth it. You were worth it too, I said, my voice rough. The next morning, February 22nd, 1996, 4 cars arrived. Dr. Cartwright came first, followed by Dr. James Morrison, the bioethicist, Sarah Chen, the attorney, and Marcus Webb, the journalist. I met them on the porch. Thank you for coming, I said. Before we begin, what you're about to see is not a discovery, it's an introduction. You're not here as researchers, you're here as potential allies in helping a sentient being establish recognition in human society. "We understand," Dr. Morrison said. "Everything he communicates must be respected as coming from a person with agency. He's not a subject to be studied without consent." "Him?" Sarah Chen asked. "Him," I confirmed. "He's male, intelligent, terrified of what revealing himself might mean." I signaled toward the forest. After a long moment, my student emerged. The reactions were immediate: gasps, exclamations. But to their credit, no one ran, no one pulled out a phone. My student walked to the board we'd set up, his full 7-foot 8-inch height visible. He picked up chalk and wrote in clear letters, "My name is Moss. I am pleased to meet you." The name surprised me. He'd never told me what he wanted to be called, but it fit perfectly. "Hello, Moss," Dr. Morrison said steadily. "I'm James Morrison. It's an honor to meet you." The others introduced themselves. Moss carefully wrote down each name, demonstrating social awareness. Then he wrote, "Mr. Keegan has taught me to read and write. I have learned about humanity. Now I want to share what I have learned, but I am afraid." "Afraid of what?" Sarah Chen asked gently. "Afraid humans will not see me as person, will see only animal, will want to cage me. I have lived free all my life. I do not want to lose that." "We're here to help you maintain that freedom," Sarah said. "But I need to be honest. This will be complicated. Human society doesn't have frameworks for non-human persons." "I understand," Moss wrote. "But alternative is worse. Alternative is being discovered without protection. I choose this risk." Escok, over the next 4 hours, Moss demonstrated his capabilities. He read passages from books. His vocalizations were rough, but the comprehension was clear. He wrote extended observations, showed philosophical reasoning, proved beyond doubt that he was conscious and intelligent. Dr. Morrison was particularly moved. "This is extraordinary," he said, reviewing the notebooks. "This meets every criterion for personhood I've studied." "Can you help him?" I asked. "Yes," Dr. Morrison said firmly. "We can try. It will require legal challenges, bioethical arguments, possibly legislative advocacy. But Moss's own words give a strong foundation." Marcus Webb spoke up. "Moss, would you be willing to share your observations about humanity? The world needs to hear your perspective." Moss looked at me, then wrote, "Yes, but not yet. First we establish that I am person. Then we share what this person thinks. Order matters." "Smart," Sarah observed. "If we lead with critique, people might dismiss it. If we establish personhood first, your observations carry more weight." By evening, we had the beginnings of a plan. Sarah would draft legal documents. Dr. Morrison would write bioethical assessment. Dr. Cartwright would provide scientific documentation. Marcus would prepare the story for when we were ready, not as Bigfoot discovered, but as serious examination of personhood. 3 months of preparation, then carefully orchestrated revelation. Press conference, legal filing, ethical statements, all coordinated to present Moss as an individual seeking recognition. That night, after everyone left, Moss and I sat together, exhausted but energized. "How do you think it went?" he asked. "Better than I hoped," I admitted. "They saw you as a person." "Because you taught me," he wrote, "gave me words, gave me way to prove I am more than body." "You were always a person," I said. "I just helped you prove it."